Hello and welcome to Absolutely Not. My name is Katrina Stroll and my pronouns are they, she, he. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Real quick, if you appreciate the work that I do here or elsewhere, please visit the Support the Mission page of my website. There are several options to choose from to support my work, so please choose one. The key words for this episode are mental health, diagnosis, and discrimination. I encourage y'all to look up the definitions of these words and compare them to the definitions you carry with you on a daily basis. If you need help comparing, please let me know. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp allows you to connect with one of 24,000 licensed therapists in a safe and private online environment. You pay just a low flat fee for unlimited therapy with your therapist. Visit www.betterhelp.com/absolutelynot for more information and to get 10% off your first month. This link can be found in the show notes. Today's episode is titled Ask for Help. Ooh. And this episode title is brought by my amazing special guest, Dr. Kojo Sarfo. He is a social media content creator, mental health nurse practitioner, and a psychotherapist with over 2 million followers on all of his social media channels. That's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Triller. He posts to promote mental health awareness and educate individuals about mental health conditions. Dr. Sarfo is also the author of an Amazon best-selling book entitled You Already Won. He is also the host of What's Good, Hollywood's #1 mental health podcast. He identifies as West African and neurodivergent. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a blessing. I appreciate it.
I'm really excited to get into this episode of Ask for Help. Doctor, why is it important for people to ask for help?
Because we were never meant to do it all by ourselves, you know? And I know at some point, I'm not sure where we went wrong, but, I think in this hustle culture, we take pride in doing things by ourselves and saying that we're self-made, this and the third. But the things that we want to do, they're collaborative. Like we need help from other people. So when you allow yourself to ask for help, it's liberating. And once you get to that side, sometimes you wonder, how you got this far doing it all on your own. So I'm a big fan of asking for help, and I'm always looking for new ways to ask for help every single day.
Man, and I love that you broke it down, because there's no point, I don't think, that they pinpoint to us like, okay, stop asking for help. Or are you aware of a time in your life where you thought you didn't need to ask for help?
Oh yeah, no, and I think when you talk about male mental health, you almost you get praised for being like a gladiator, like being able to do it all on your own. So growing up, I thought that, to be a real man, like I had to, do it on my own, not show any signs of weakness, not really ask for help. I don't need anybody for anything. I have it all figured out. Because when you look at the people at the top, you didn't know what type of help they had. So we just thought that they were doing it on their own. So yeah, growing up, that's how I thought, to be honest. So I'm thankful for my clinical experience and just life for teaching me that you don't have to do it all on your own.
Ooh, so many words. See, and this is why I'm thankful that you are here on the show today, because
I appreciate it.
Even the word gladiator that you use, that's kind of an identity that we're given. Like we're given that identity. I didn't sign up for this gladiator life. When did you kind of shuck that identity and say, no, I no longer want to be a gladiator?
I would say, when I was around 21 years old and I had my first job working in the psychiatric hospital, as a psych RN, a staff RN, and just seeing how similar the patients were to us. They were just like us, but they had maybe a couple of different life circumstances. Maybe they had death in the family, or they were carrying so much on their back to the point where they just kind of like imploded from within, from all that pressure. And that's when I started to like draw the parallels between their lives and my life. And it was kind of like a warning, to tell me, hey, if you don't find a way to, set some boundaries, this could be you. Like, you're not any better than them. You're not any worse than them. We're all human. So just having that experience, and getting to be in that setting, was very helpful for me personally.
Mm-hmm. And I am tearing up because I have been hospitalized multiple times. And the dynamic there is very strange, as you are aware. It's very strange, and it's very much made to feel like you are there for a reason. You're very much there for a reason. You're not normal. You need to get it together so that you can leave this institution. What have you been able to, I guess, what kind of stigma have you been able to remove from yourself internally as a person who works in kind of that field, in that space, so
Mhm.
that you're not projecting that onto the people you're working with?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Working in that environment, it uncovers everything that you believed about mental health. Like, everything that you thought was true, everything that you found out it wasn't true. Like, you get to, like, in order to have any type of longevity in that environment, you have to really take a deep dive and look into yourself. And I realized that, asking for help is a sign of strength, and that the sooner you do it, the better. It's better to be proactive and preemptive with these types of things. And like, I can think back to many patients who, like, when I sat down with them and, like, I looked at their story, I realized that there was a trauma or something that happened to them. And they had a period of time where if they had received help, they would not have been in the hospital, but because of life circumstances or because of stigma, a lot of times some people actually had the resources to go get help, believe it or not. But, they didn't want people to know, their spouse or a friend to know that, okay, I'm taking a week off of work to go to the psychiatric hospital because, if you go into the hospital because you have diabetes and your blood sugars are out of whack, like, you can tell friends, oh, like, my insulin died, and then they say, okay, that's fine. It's a medical condition. But if you tell somebody that, like, maybe you were manic and you're in the hospital, we don't have like, we're just now starting to have those conversations. So it wasn't accepted to, like, tell people that. So, like, people would think that, okay, I'd just rather go through this alone than to have to tell people about it. Cause, like, the embarrassment that comes from telling people that you were hospitalized, like, that supersedes everything in your brain. So being able to recognize that, like, to not be worried about people's opinions and to just lay it all out there, it's a liberating thing. And if you can get to that point, then you realize, wow, like, you want everybody else to get to that point because you see that they're carrying such a big weight on their back, and, like, what it feels like. But the thing is, you can't control other people's actions. So it's frustrating because you see a part of yourself in them. And then the best you can do is, make videos online and talk to people, and eventually over time people get there, because it took a while for you to get there. If you think about it, like, you have to go through your own journey to get to that point. So understanding that what you've been through doesn't define you. Like, you'll go through all types of situations, and you don't want to be at the mercy of your experiences, because, like, you can't really control what happens to you. So that shouldn't define, how you feel about yourself as a person.
The words, the words. I hope everyone is hearing these amazing words. One of the biggest things I am taking away from this is you really do not, you can't control other people. You can only control yourself. You might want to focus on yourself because that's something you can control. And throughout this journey, you've talked about how you had to dive deep within yourself, and you are now bringing that message to other people, which brings us to the topic of your work that you do on the TikToks, on the Instagrams, on the everything. What sparked that? Why did you start talking to other people about how heavy the stigma is?
But once I learned about, the suffering that was out there, like, I knew, like, when you work in that environment, you recognize that everyday people go through this type of thing. But for me, like, when I was working, back in Virginia doing the forensic psychiatry job, like, I realized that, I had like maybe 22 to 25 patients, and I saw human suffering, like, up close and personal. But when I started to post online, and I started just for fun because I was bored. And then as I started to talk about what I did, and, I would post from my office, people would ask me all these different questions. I realized very quickly that a lot of people were struggling with their mental health, and nobody was talking about it. So the more I would post, I kept learning that, oh, wow, people are going through these types of issues, and not everybody will meet the criteria for hospitalization, and sometimes you don't even have to have a mental health diagnosis to die by suicide, like, if we're keeping it real. So this could affect anybody. And once I got to see, like, just going through the DMs and the comments, I was like, whoa, this is like a space that has not been tapped. So once I realized that, and I started to post more and more content, more feedback came in, and I started to see that people were struggling with things on a daily basis, and that just by acknowledging them, that could help them out. Like, maybe I'll never see them as their provider, but just by, like, showing that that's normal. Like, if I post a video and it has like 3 million views, and then you go to the comment section, people are saying, oh, I do this too, then like you feel a little less alone, because we're just now coming out of this pandemic, hopefully, where, you know, we've been by ourselves. So if you were going through a certain situation, you really thought that it was just you, because we're more isolated than ever. So this, that validation, it allowed me to keep making videos, and it kind of like helped to birth this brand out of nowhere.
That's awesome. And the thing I like most about you is, well, you as a content creator, is that you are not afraid to use the vocabulary needed to talk about mental health and the stigma. You talk about hospitalization like on a daily basis. One of my
Right.
favorite TikTok / reels from you is how to celebrate someone coming home from hospitalization,
Right.
because maybe people is not prepared. People are not
Right.
prepared. What would spark that reel or that TikTok?
Well, that came from personal experiences, you know, because when you work in the, you know, the psychiatric facility, you know, for the patient, like when they come in, it's one of the worst days of their life. Like a lot of them may be aggressive, you know, and upset, and, you know, they're saying, I don't need to be here. And, you know, you compare that to when they leave, like that's one of the happiest days of their lives. Like they're so excited to get out. They're like, all right, I know what meds I gotta take, you know, like they're just so happy to get back to their families, you know, so like it's such a momentous occasion. And just it's one of my favorite moments, like working with a patient. Like, you know, I'm just talking with them. It's almost like I'm a coach and they're a player. I'm telling them, all right, you're gonna go out there, score points. And it's just a very fun time, you know, and then they're excited to get their phones back, because a lot of times you can't have your phone in the facility. So they want to get their phones back and see like who's been like DMing them on Instagram, like the old text messages. So it feels good to get back in to society. So when I was thinking to myself, I was like, okay, how can I bring this concept to life? And let me just put it out there. And I wasn't sure who could relate with it, because in my world, you know, I'm coming from the professional's perspective, and I don't know that many people who would talk about their experiences online, you know. So I was like, you know, let me just put it out there and see where things go.
And I appreciate that, because some of the things that's not talked about in mental health, they like to talk about the butterflies and the flowers and the yoga and the bubble baths and the what have you. Um, but they don't talk about specifics. And you are specific on Black mental health. You are specific on male
Right.
mental health. You are specific on other communities and how they have tied to mental health. How important do you think that is to the conversation around mental health?
It's so important. I'm sorry. It's so important because when you talk about Black mental health, people don't realize that the DSM-5, which is what we use to, you know, diagnose people, if African Americans make up 13 to 14% of the country, and traditionally we've never really sought out mental health help, then how can you be confident that the Bible of psychiatry accurately portrays what we go through, you know? And when you talk about certain conditions, like, you know, for Black people, you know, they're overdiagnosed with conditions like schizophrenia, you know, and these type of things happen. And based off of the diagnosis, that's going to dictate the treatment. So, you know, you're going to be loaded with antipsychotics and things like that. And just by being Black too, I had a psychiatrist tell me in school that just by being Black, if you come to the ER, right, or you come to the psych ward and you're aggressive, even a little bit, you're going to be seen as more threatening than a white person who looks just like you, the same type of build. So it's important to talk about Black mental health, and it's a space that like we haven't even tapped it at all. Like people don't know that like in the Black community, a lot of things that we go through are traumatic, you know, but nobody ever puts a name on it. So people are living with trauma, and sometimes you don't realize that you've been traumatized until you grow up and like you're in a relationship and it starts to come out. You know, so if we can talk about these things more and provide a safe space for, you know, our Black youth, it's going to be very helpful. You know, because I'm monitoring the statistics. You know, even though I'm posting the content online, but I'm always keeping like a, you know, an ear to the psychiatry streets. I want to figure out what's going on with the evidence. And when it comes to like, you know, suicide in the Black community, like the rates are going up and people aren't talking about it, and our families don't even know how to give us that safe space. So we're just sitting there and we're doing the best that we can. So if we allow it to be okay for people to go out, and like we're going to be the generation that has to teach our kids about mental health. Like, you know, they talk about teaching you about the planets and, you know, the stars, and, you know, they'll teach you about Lewis and Clark and history. All that stuff is cool. But, you know, some of the fundamental things like mental health, being kind to people, you know, recognizing the signs and symptoms of depression, how to help people out, Like that's not in the curriculums in schools. And, you know, we just kind of assume that, oh, it's not going to help you like when you become an adult. But those things need to be taught in the formative years, especially for, you know, us as a people. So when it comes to Black mental health, you know, any type of attention, whether it's an artist, you know, making a song about it, or if it's somebody posting a TikTok video, any type of attention is going to be good, because we just have to bring it to the forefront, because a lot of us don't realize that there's that disparity. So any type of, you know, positive, you know, attention that we can, you know, draw to Black mental health, I think is going to be very important. It's crucial.
And I appreciate you once again breaking it down for the people who may not understand, because maybe I've curated my feed by now, but every time I see a new suicide in the headlines, it is a Black person. It is somebody who looks exactly like me, or my dad, or my brother, or my cousins, and it is heartbreaking. But to your point, the definitions or the Bibles are not talking about Black mental health. Like when you hear about trauma, you see like veterans, or you see like incidents that occur. They ain't talking about poverty. They're not talking about not having a stable household. They're not talking about the relationships. When did you, or have you ever had to educate practitioners around you on the differences between the Bible and what's actually going on in these communities?
All the time, you know, and that's the beauty of working in a hospital, because, you know, like my office where it was located back in Virginia, like the psychiatrist across from me, she's Puerto Rican, you know, and then down that, you know, same aisle, like that psychiatrist was white, you know, so I'm talking to people who don't look like me, and, you know, I'm telling them, like, because I have a patient come in, and I remember back in Georgia, I had a patient come in, and he was, you know, singing some type of Young Thug song, right? So he was rambling the lyrics off, and I knew the exact song that he was talking about. But I remember seeing the psychiatrist put in a note saying that, oh, this person is having a flight of ideas, ramble speech. I'm like, no, he's like, this is a Young Thug song. Like, I know this song, right? But with the cultural differences, it's gonna look as if the person is psychotic. But I'm like, that's one of my favorite songs, you know? So like to tell, and I let the psychiatrist know, I'm like, hey, like that's like a song. And I played on my phone, he was laughing, but I'm like, that's a song. And I'm not telling, you know, the boss that, hey, I'm not saying that your assessment is wrong, but like, hey, this is like a song, you know, within our culture, this is how things work. So it's important to educate people, because once the patient feels understood, then they can come and talk to you. Because like for me, I have patients who were Black, and when they saw that I was Black, they felt more comfortable, you know, telling me about what they've been through, and a lot of the things that they go through in their childhood, like it's traumatic. But like if they never tell you, you'll never know, you know. So how can you arrive at a diagnosis of PTSD and then proceed with treatment if the patient doesn't tell you what they're going through? You know, so I think to have more minority providers is helpful, but then to educate the providers who don't look like us, because there's a shortage. Like if we're telling the truth, there's a severe shortage. We don't have enough providers, you know, based on the people that need help. So we're going to have to rely on our counterparts who do not look like us. They're a very big part of the equation. So just telling them like, oh, this is how we do things in our culture. Or sometimes like to tell a therapist like, hey, you can't just tell, you know, a Black youth that they should just like cut off their mother. Like, you know, like our parents, the church, you know, like depending on like how you grew up, that might be like embedded into like who you are, into your identity. So it's important to educate our peers, you know, on a professional level, because believe it or not, like we're going to need those people to help out with mental health in general.
I appreciate once again breaking it down, because there are a lot of people out there who will take that. Sorry, I'm going to say this wrong. DSM-5, and yes, and immediately say, no, this is what it is. This is what it is. We can't go beyond that. I don't have to look outside of the scope of my own experiences. But for you as a practitioner to talk to those other practitioners and let them know there are huge differences in what's in that written word from what's being experienced here, it makes a hell of a lot of differences. I have come in contact with practitioners who refuse to do so. Do you have any words for those practitioners who are afraid to educate their white counterparts?
You know, if you're afraid, like I would then challenge that practitioner to explore their own feelings. Like, why are you afraid? You know, and sometimes there's nothing wrong with digging deep and, you know, learning a little bit about yourself. And it's very uncomfortable. And as a practitioner, if you're working and you have your clientele, you're making your money, you're making an impact, sometimes you might feel as if there's little incentive for you to learn, because like, especially depending on the type of work you're doing. If you're just prescribing medications, you're like, oh, here's the medication, boom, boom, boom. But I think you can uncover so much about yourself, like when you dig deep and you try and figure out, why am I uncomfortable talking about race? Why am I uncomfortable talking about some of these sensitive topics, and like, we don't have to agree on these things, but just, I think for somebody who doesn't look like me, for them to sit there and pause and even to make the effort to try and figure out why they're uncomfortable about a certain thing, I appreciate that a lot. Because sometimes people want to feel as if they have to make the other person understand where they're coming from, and they may never get it. Based off of how they've grown up, they may just never get it. But if you make an attempt to try and see like, oh, this is how things are in our culture, then it's going to be very important for you to, if you can't get it, to at least tell other people, hey, I'm talking to this Black doctor, and he told me about this is how things work in this environment. And at some point, they'll come across a patient who they're able to help out because they took the time out to learn a little bit about themselves, and then they were able to talk about some of those sensitive topics. And then at that point, they're like, oh wow, like I did this a bit of work on myself, and I was able to connect with somebody who I've never been able to connect with before. And if they're able to do that, then word of mouth, they can tell another provider, and then those type of conversations can make a big change and can actually save a lot of lives.
And we have touched on this a lot, that mental health is just starting to open up. Right. It's just starting to see human beings as human beings, and it's just starting to remove the stigma from places, but there's still a lot of work to do. But to your point, if you don't do the work, it's just not going to get done. You have to do that work internally. What is some of the work that you're doing internally now to ensure you're an amazing practitioner that you are?
That's a fantastic question. And one thing that I do currently is I ask people who are close to me and people who know about me. I ask them, I'm like, hey, can you give me some feedback on, how I'm doing, like as a person, like, is there anything that I can improve on, or like, do you think I can get some more sleep, or is there anything that you see in my content that I think I can tweak? Like, I'm always looking for ways to reach new people, and having that safe space where people can come and say, hey, I like the work that you do with so-and-so, but I think, maybe if you can switch up this type of, language, or if you can make it simpler, you can reach a wider audience, and just sometimes looking through like a viral video and looking at the comments, I'm seeing what people are going through, and you have to, I tell everybody, if you're good at this job, there's going to be days where you're going to be drained out. Like, you can't be good at this job and then every single day you finish, your work and like, you're just like all happy. No, some days you have to kind of go there to where the patient's at, and like I've had days where I've had to go there to where patient's at. And afterwards, I couldn't even make a video for a couple of hours because like I'm in that state of mind where like you have to just sometimes just sit there in silence with your patient and mentally be where they are, to be empathetic, so to be able to do that is a special thing. And if you don't like stay, knowledgeable about what's affecting people, you're going to lose that relatability. And it's going to make it difficult for you to connect with people. So I'm always looking through the comments. I'm always looking for ways to improve myself. And I'm always looking for things that, sometimes we have our own, biases as well. Sometimes I might believe something because of my personal experience, but that might not be how it is for somebody else. So just talking about that and saying, hey, why do you believe so-and-so is, this is important to you because it's not as important for me, like those uncomfortable conversations. The same way, somebody who is white or somebody who is not like a minority has to dig deep and like talk about racism and mental health and how that can lead to poorer outcomes. Like I have to, as a man, like as a straight male, I know that I have a lot of privilege as compared to people in the LGBTQ community, people, who identify as trans, or even like a Black woman. Like between a Black man and Black woman, I feel like as a Black man, you have more of a privilege. So sometimes like I talk to my sisters, my 3 sisters are Black women. They'll say, hey, we feel as if things are different for us because of X, Y, and Z. Like, have you talked about that? Is there a way that you could talk about this in a video? And I think I had that conversation with my sisters and my cousins. And I was talking about how Black women, they're not listened to when they go to the doctor's office. And even Serena Williams nearly died from childbirth. So sometimes like we have to really have those conversations with the people close to us to bring it to the forefront, because if it doesn't affect me personally, it might not be the first thing in my mind. So it's not that I'm an evil person and I don't want to talk about it, but there's so many things going through my mind. But when you have those conversations with the people that you love, they're like, hey, I know you can reach a wide audience. And as a Black woman, this means a lot to me if you talked about this. And then I'm like, all right, cool. Let me go to the drawing board and let me come up with a way to put out this idea in a way that it's funny or, informative, but in a way that is going to reach millions of people, and when I think about it from that perspective, those videos always do well, because like I'm taking a relatable situation and I'm putting it out there, so sometimes, like I like to talk and all that, but for me, the best thing to do is just to listen and figure out what is affecting people and how can I use my platform to help out.
And I hope y'all heard that. It's the safe spaces. You are creating safe spaces to have these conversations. So please don't take that and just walk up to people and ask them questions about their experiences. These spaces have to be made. They have to be cultivated. Right. They have to be created to have these conversations. So thank you so much for bringing that into this space, because these conversations need to be had, but they have to be done safely. I appreciate it. And that work that you're doing, you said it's not top of mind for you, but you went out your way to find somebody who it is top of mind for. And that's what people need to be doing. This work that you're doing sounds taxing, sounds emotionally taxing. You talked about sitting in silence, baby, that made my heart string. It pulled at my heartstring.
Right.
What boundaries are you setting within your work and all of the work that you're doing so that you remain whole, at least at the end of the week?
Right. So that's a great question. And it's funny that you asked that question, because like we talked about in the beginning of the podcast, it takes more than one person to do amazing things. So I started off as one person, but I'm only here because I brought a team along with me, and I have a team of about 6 or 7 people that help me out, to help me, stay organized, to help to edit things, to help to like identify certain things and say, oh, people really want to know about this, or I look through your comments and people are very curious about this. Do you have evidence to talk about this, or can we make a funny skit to help people with this? And even now, like with my team, I have somebody who does my schedule. I don't really know what I have to do each and every day. I just wake up in the morning, wake up early and look at my schedule, and it'll tell me what to do. And like my lead assistant, like he'll, like if I'm getting too booked, he'll say, hey, you have back to back meetings. Do you really want to do this? Because tomorrow you have this, you might be burnt out. So like I have things in place because I know myself, like I want to do everything. Like I get impulsive and I just want to do every podcast. I want to hop, like I want to do it all, because I started out doing it on my own and like I was just doing things. But to have longevity, like you can burn out doing things that you actually love. And I love doing this, but now I have a system. I believe that in order to do great things, you need a system. So that requires a lot of asking for help, So as I'm talking about, my own mental health and the things that I struggle with, I just tell the people about the things that, can make me more effective and more efficient. And that's just by asking for help. And anytime I have like an increase in like, either have more time or more money, the first thing that I look for is, what can I do to make things easier for myself? Like who can I hire, or who can my assistant bring on to make things easier for myself so I can sleep 7 to 8 hours a night, so that I can spend time on the phone with my mom? Because if not, I'm going to forget, and I'm just going to get burnt out. So like having that system has been what's really helped me out.
And everyone in the chat is saying this is an amazing conversation. So thank you so much for dropping those gems.
Appreciate you.
What I'm taking away from it is you have to know yourself. Know that if you're able to, you will burn yourself the fuck out.
Right.
So you need someone there to stop that if it
exactly
happen, and bring it on the peoples, because those people know you and they'll know when to tell you to stop. I appreciate that. For the people that are listening to this who are thinking, okay, tomorrow I'm going to ask for help, what are the top 3 tips that you would share with them about having those conversations?
The first thing that I would say is make it okay to ask for help. Like if you're asking for help, but you feel kind of bad about doing it, you may ask for help that one time, but you may not do it again. So I would say the first thing to do is to make it okay for yourself to ask for help, And the second thing that comes to mind is I would talk to other people who are doing what you want to do, or what like what you're currently doing. If they've done that in the past, ask them like, how did they go about their day-to-day tasks? Like, who do they have on their team? Because like if you admire somebody from afar, and you want to do what they're doing, like you might just think, oh, they're putting out all these videos a day. I just want to do the same thing. And you could match them, but maybe they have like 10 people helping them out and you're doing it by yourself. At some point, you're going to crash and burn, you know? And the last thing that I would say is pace yourself, you know, because even if you have help, you can't do it all. And, you know, like my team, you know, they'll say, hey, Kojo, like in the past, it's taking you 2 weeks to pull this off. And we have a week and a half and you want to do this. So we're not telling you that you can't do it, but you may want to reconsider, which is just a nice way of them saying, Kojo, you're burnt out, give it up. And I'll say, oh, I appreciate it, you know, because like you said, they picked up on my tendencies and like, all right, we know Kojo wants to go on this. He wants to do boom, 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 but we only have this amount of time. So what can we do now that will allow you to be as effective or almost as effective? And it'll allow you to have sleep and to take care of yourself. And then we can do this thing later on. It's not that we can't do it, but we have to be mindful of the time that we have, you know? So I think you have to understand that like things that you enjoy can still burn you out. So you've got to pace yourself.
And that's going to be a hard pill to swallow. Things that you enjoy can still burn you out. I don't think anybody told us that. So I appreciate you bringing that into this space. For anybody who is listening to this, I hope you take away so much because I know that I did. Do you have any last minute sprinkles for the audience before we go today?
Yeah, I would say, you know, something that's been heavy on my mind is, you know, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I think it's easy for us to, you know, post about mental health and identify with people who struggle with the things that we struggle with, right? So for me having ADHD, like if somebody is talking about ADHD online, it's so much easier for me to empathize with them. But if somebody's going through a different type of struggle, it might be harder for you to say, oh, that person needs help as well. So I think, you know, in today's world where everybody is like, you know, it's so divisive. You have some people on the left, people on the right. I think this, I think that. Sometimes we have to understand that it's okay we can agree to disagree. And I can struggle this way and you can struggle this way. But if we really want to be about mental health awareness, we should be promoting it for people who don't look like us and people who don't believe what we believe. And that's really hard for people to do. So I think if we can make any improvements, you know, in that category, it's going to help us be kinder to one another. And we can go really far just with that mindset.
Damn. I hope everybody takes that mindset into the rest of May, into the rest of the year, because don't stop. It does not stop. But thank you so much for being such an amazing special guest. To everyone who's listening, keep setting those boundaries and saying absolutely not to everything unaligned. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.